Hello everyone, this is Matthew and welcome to another one of my video diaries. Today is May 3rd. This is volume 10 and it is a lovely Saturday in May. Normally I work on Saturdays, but today I had it off, so I had a more leisurely preparation for this video. I hope it shows. I have a feeling it may not. I may seem as crazy and as unprepared as normal. So I do have some bad news. I only wrote 582 words, so I've written now a total of 22,790 words. And I wrote less than I wanted to, and I'm not so crazy about the words that I did write. And I mean, I have a lot of excuses for this, but I think the major reason is that I'm starting a new chapter. And if you've watched any of my other videos, you know that, or you've watched the key ones, you know that I'm writing a book with 9 major sections in it, and each section is geared to one particular character. And this new section has a totally new character's voice, and I really need to find that voice, and I'm having a little difficulty doing it. So, what can you do? And I managed to write a bit, but I'm still really trying to find that character's voice, and it is a little bit difficult. And I also know that this is the time when I'm going to have difficulty writing. You know, at the beginning of writing a book, you start off and you have all these ideas and you're so excited about everything. And now I have to say that some of those ideas, those initial ideas, are kind of not as inspiring as they used to be, and now I have to find new inspiration, and I have to kind of impel myself further, and it is a little bit difficult. So yeah, and also I have the problem that, you know, there's ideas coming from everywhere about, you know, all the things that I want to put in my book, and at first it was just like content. Now I'm starting to get inspiration or distraction that is changing how I want to think about the whole structure of my book, which is a problem because, you know, I don't want to start changing my structure right now. It'll just ruin everything and it'll be crazy, and I don't want to do that. But I mean, it did make me think because I saw, not really saw, kind of listened to a documentary while I was making dinner and my boyfriend was watching it, the Sarah Polley documentary. And I didn't watch all of it either, or didn't listen to all of it, but I did hear enough to be intrigued by it. And, you know, I don't think that she's necessarily doing everything that's totally original or new, but what I really liked about how she approached her subject was that the topic is her mother and some events that have happened in her mother's life. And there's like some key, really exciting events in her mother's life. And she doesn't wait until the end to really tell you what those key or exciting events are. She tells you close to the beginning, but then she keeps going back to those events. And each time those events are retold, you get more and more information, and it becomes more and more interesting. And each time there's like a new twist, or she really tries to, you know, she really tries to like change your opinion of those original events each time she retells it, or one of the people in the documentary retells it. And I was realizing that that's a great way to structure, you know, a piece of nonfiction, is not to like, oh, okay, I'm going to wait until the end to tell the major important detail. I'm going to tell it really quickly at the front and then approach it multiple times. And as you might know, if you've seen some of these videos before, you know that I'm trying to write this as like a nonfiction piece. So this approach, which worked for her documentary, could really work for my novel. And so that's good, but it's not something I should be thinking about right now. Because I should be thinking about how wonderful my structure is and how I'm going to finish a first draft with this structure, even though I don't know how so I can build up the energy and inspiration to do it. So I just have to. And I also have to remember, this is something I knew going into this, that my first draft was going to be, it wasn't going to be perfect. Well, I mean, everyone knows their first draft isn't going to be perfect, but I knew that even structure-wise, my first draft wasn't going to be perfect, and that because I wanted this documentary or nonfiction feel, I was going to have to write a lot of stuff around my story that was not going to be put into the story. And so, as I'm writing, I have to be aware that a lot of this writing is going to be just like cut out, and that is hard to think about as you're writing. You don't want to think, oh, these 3,000 words that I just wrote are probably just going to be cut out. But it's what I have to, so I have to, but it's what's going to happen. So I have to really just not focus on that and think about, oh, these wonderful 3,000 words that I just wrote are going to go in and they're going to remain there and everything's going to be beautiful and wonderful and I will not have to change a word, which is kind of the lie you have to tell yourself while you're writing a first draft. But as well, I mean, this also connects with the reading that I was doing this week, which is that I finished my struggle. I'm no longer struggling with my struggle. And so yay for me. And I have to, I do owe Mr. Karl of Knausgaard an apology because I said this was not a good book. Well, probably implied that this was not a good book because I went on about how boring it is. And I have to say that the ending was pretty good. It's a pretty good ending. And it does encourage me to recommend the book. I mean, it's still, the middle is still super boring. But that was also what made me think about my book too, was that his middle is kind of boring because I have no idea where the book is going to go. In the middle of the book, I had no idea how it was going to end. No idea. It could have ended anyway because it was like a document, like it's an autobiography, and I have no idea how he wants to end this. So it made me realize that by me delaying the important fact that I kind of want everyone to know in my story until the end will really make my novel boring. And so I do have to reconsider that. And at the end, he does sort of do what Sarah Polley did, which is that there is a death in his book, and he keeps coming back to it. And all of those boring details that, were driving me crazy before, not that the previous boring details seem that exciting or interesting, but because he's built up the habit of telling you all the boring details that are around this death become really interesting because they're just close to death. And, we often, when we're sometimes people will say to us, oh, do you remember what you were doing when so-and-so died, And even if you were doing the most boring thing, suddenly that event seems interesting because it's close to death. And that's kind of similar to what he's doing where, those boring details seem so much more beautiful than the most carefully chosen, like, artful details because they seem more authentic and they just seem more compelling. I had to write down synonyms of interesting so that I wouldn't just say interesting all the time. So more compelling. They seem more compelling. And so that made me really, that 1-2 punch, the Sarah Polley, and finishing this book really did make me think about the structure of my book and how I should probably reconsider where I'm bringing the major death that happens in my book. So there was that. I mean, there's a lot of other things I could talk about, but it really did pay off towards the end, and I'll give it a thumbs up. And so that means I'm reading a new book, and I'm reading Renata Renata. I can't speak. Renata Adler. I don't know how to pronounce it. Sorry, I don't. And her book Speedboat. And apparently, I am the last cool kid on the block to read this. And apparently, everyone else has read it, and it's like, oh, so 2000 and I'm so 2000 and late or whatever. But I've started reading it. It's interesting so far. I've only read like 10 pages of it, so my impressions are incredibly unformed and have no basis in reality, really. But it does feel like Paul Fox's desperate characters, and uh, and I'm not just saying that because they're both written in the 70s, although that is a kind of one of the major themes that unites them is that they're both in New York in the 70s, and they're both kind of, so far, I mean, I've only read 10 pages, about about how it must have felt like civilization was collapsing in the 70s. There was definitely a kind of apocalyptic feel to fiction at that time, if it was set in New York. I mean, it must have seemed like the end of times because, you know, everything, there was huge sections of the city that were basically abandoned, and, you know, graffiti was everywhere, and the city went bankrupt, and just all sorts of crazy things were happening. So it must have felt like a very apocalyptic time to live in New York in the 70s. Um, but the other thing that I really liked that I kind of wish was in books more nowadays is that uh, she feels like she's a little, it's bonkers. The book is bonkers. And she feels she she could say anything on the next page. I have no idea where it's going. No idea. So far, it's interesting. I mean, maybe I will get bored because I have no idea where it's going. But so far, it seems interesting. And I was thinking about how no one would ever publish a book like this right now. I mean, maybe wrong. Who knows? Maybe someone published a book exactly like this. But it doesn't feel like it's very au courant in what people are writing about right now. And I think partially it's because, um, you know, I think I do feel like because the publishing industry is struggling a bit more than it was in the 70s, although I do think that the publishing industry has always been in a state of terror. But in particular, I feel like people don't want to make as many risks as they used to in the as they used to in the 70s. So it definitely feels like this is just a little bit too wacky to exist now. And I think also like punk changed the way people approached experimenting and experimentalization. It's not even a word. And they now, when you're experimental, you have to be a little bit like so in someone's face and like really aggressive, and you have to want to change them or confront them. And uh, whereas this feels so much more relaxed, and like the experimentalism or avant-gardism feels more, I don't know, just natural and organic. And I wonder if that's just the nature of what the avant-garde is now, or and versus what it was then. You know, I don't know. It's something to consider. Anyway, hasn't given me any ideas about my book. I'm not writing anything remotely similar to this. So yeah, we'll see. We'll see if it inspires me. But otherwise, that is all I really have to say this week. I hope you enjoyed my video, and I hope I write more for next week. I mean, part of the reason why I do these videos is so that I can kind of consider what I've been working on and think about what I'm going to work on next. And I kind of actually feel that I have thought about and developed solutions for some of the problems that I've been having as I was preparing for this video. So who knows? I might be really ready to tell you an enormous number next week. I don't know. But until then, I hope you have a good week. I will hopefully have a good week too. Okay, bye.